Hi, I am here today with Hope Easterbrook, of Ensemble Member for the original Hamilton cast. She then went on to teach and then to share education through movement in Rwanda through Mind Leaps. And then after that, she started up Dance for Hope, her own organization sharing dance and movement and empowerment healing with vulnerable populations. And we're so excited to have you today, Hope.
Hey, hi guys. That was
How are you
perfect.
doing today? How are you feeling?
I feel really good. I feel really good. It's a beautiful day out. I got to walk in the park, the little things in life. So I feel really good. I'm happy to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to a dual screen. They like change up Zoom.
Oh, go to the gallery view. Are you on your phone?
Yes, but
Oh,
I do.
I don't know what the
Mhm.
not
That's
right.
okay if it just shows you. I'm thinking more of
Okay.
this auditory with YouTube, but we'll see. Um,
Okay.
anyways, um, amazing. Um, so yeah, what maybe is a good starting off point? What's so striking to me, going from Broadway, like this big Broadway stage of this hit musical, like it took off, and then you go into teaching, and then you're in Africa, serving underserved communities. Can you speak to that? Was that like a huge culture shift, or what was that like for you?
Huge. I mean, single-handedly changed my life, that trip. Um, that's the short answer. The longer answer is I had known about this company, Mind Leaps, this organization, nonprofit, through a friend, Lamar Baylor. He's in The Lion King, wonderful, beautiful human. And he was out there with Misty Copeland, and I was in Rwanda, and I reached out to him, being like, what are you doing? What is this? And I learned more about Mind Leaps, and my brain went like this, and I reached out to the director, Rebecca Davis, and I was like, I need to. I don't remember what year this was. I imagine. So I went to Rwanda in summer of 2018. So 3 years before whatever year that is. But I reached out to her and I was like, hey, I teach hip hop, I teach theater. Like, I would love to go out if there's an opportunity to work in the field. Like, I want to go, and if there's a way for me to get there. 3 years down the line, like there were no jobs. 3 years down the line, she hit me up and she said they were doing a teacher trainer program. So the trainers from all the countries, so Uganda, the uh, trainers in Rwanda, um, Guinea, and I'm forgetting the fourth one. But they all were coming to Rwanda to train and learn from, there were a couple US people, a couple, different trainers doing different styles. And I went out there doing hip hop, which was, and jazz, and it changed my life. Like, the culture, it was not the culture shock alone, which personally did a huge number on my journey. It's a huge journey, and that's a whole other thing. But I realized the power that dance had in these kinds of communities, and I was seeing it. When you think about the program is a movement based program to try and introduce education, math, science, technology, all of these things into these children's lives through the movement, through the curriculum, the dance curriculum. And because it's something that's a part of their culture already, it's not something they have to think about. So for them, learning their cognitive skills through these dance classes the transition made so much sense to their education. And I got to train with, some really, really, really interesting young people, one of whom knew Kinyarwanda, of course, his native language, English, French, and Chinese, and was going to college for technology, like, I for tech. And I was like, what? Like, and Mind Leaps, he was able to do that because of Mind Leaps, because of that program. And I just, like, that kind of blew my mind. Coming home after that felt like really sad. I didn't feel like that was me fulfilling my purpose. Like we always talk about that, and like I thought it was Hamilton. Like I thought that was me fulfilling my purpose, and I had no idea that it was this. And so when I came back, I was like, I have to do something. Like I have to feel that again. And it did come from a personal place of like lust, or not lust, but longing of that longing for that sense of purpose that I had in Rwanda. And coming back, and then meanwhile, the crisis at the border with these immigrant children in our own country, I saw that as like my way in to serving underserved communities with arts and dance and music and all of these things, because like that was my way in, you know. I knew someone that knew was a part of handling kind of these shelters, basically being in contact with these shelters that are housing undocumented youth. And that was my way in. And like my first kind of pilot dance class, Dance for Hope event, was like 50 undocumented kids in a dance studio at Alvin Ailey on like the 6th floor. And it was just one of those moments where I was like, here it is, like this is the start of something that I hope it is like bigger than me, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you've gotten to that place of bigger than you. But anyways, yeah, to back up just a little bit, I'm really intrigued. You're talking about how movement is so central in the culture of these Rwandan kids you are working with. And I imagine that takes such a high degree of cultural sensitivity, and that also relating to those classes for migrant children. So they don't see you as this like white savior, you know, someone coming in with a white savior complex, because that can be so off-putting, right? And that just like can shut the whole thing down. So maybe can you talk to that a little bit about the way Mind Leaps put that into work, maybe the way with Dance for Hope, giving those classes, the way you were intentional about that?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Even Rebecca probably would say I had zero training. Like I had no idea what I was going in for. For people that are interested, they have a Mind Leaps training program that a lot of the teachers that end up teaching on the field do. And I didn't have the opportunity to do that. They just had an opening, and it was kind of last minute. And so I literally had I was like, it was an open slate. I just knew that this program I had read about and I had seen videos about, and but it isn't something that you can fully understand until you're actually in it. And learning about, it was so cool to like, I lived with the trainers, so we lived in the same house, so I really got to know them and got to understand like their different cultures from their different countries, as well as learning about Rwandan culture. Getting to the opportunity to go to the genocide memorial was beyond overwhelming, as someone that didn't not fully understand it until, again, like till you're in it. That was something that was so wild, because here I am and I'm teaching survivors. Like these kids are survivors of something that is so horrific you can't even comprehend it, right? And here they are, they're overcoming that adversity, that trauma with dance, and that is their way out. So I just was like I said, you can't really fully understand it till you're in it, but it really did shape my mentality.
Right. Yeah, and I was going to ask about sort of cultural and generational trauma, and you touched upon that, and things that can be so deep that words can't access. And perhaps someone coming in from the States, or that's not steeped in that culture and the language in a sort of nuanced way. Well, how do you access that movement? Because it's that universal language and music. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the language was actually a barrier. A lot of the students that are, in Mind Leaps are learning English. That's part of their curriculum, which is really important. And some of them are in different places than others, and so that was my first kind of way in of realizing I don't need to talk as much as I used to when I'm teaching. I can use more, more gestures. I can communicate in a different way, which is actually, believe it or not, really helpful on Zoom. Um, just like the hand gestures of like, okay, we're good, but yeah, you absolutely are right. That language, that it is a universal language.
Hmm. Hmm. Amazing. And interesting, I'm seeing this like parallel back to Hamilton, and there are like these two levels of like reaching down. I mean, I hate to put it that way, but like lifting up, right? And also representation at the highest levels. Like a Broadway stage that is so intentionally representative of people that are not usually on the Broadway stage, at least in like on, the whole stage.
Yeah.
um, yeah, so I wanted to also talk to you a little bit about the aspect of representation in Hamilton. And how did you see that being important? Did it play into the culture? Um,
It's Hamilton is um it's kind of the first of its kind in that sense. Um, there, I personally, thought it was a beautiful way of telling the story of our founding, with these people of color's voices. I, as far as what you were saying, kind of the parallels between like Hamilton and like what I've been working with. Sorry, just not to just bring it back to myself,
ah,
because
that's what it's about.
this
We're
is
talking
very
about your journey
important.
today.
But the immigration, Hamilton was an immigrant, and Hamilton came here, and I singing about the orphanage. I unfortunately lost both my parents, so I know what it feels like to not to live through that trauma and go through that. And so there is a sort of connection I have with these youth that have been like torn apart from their families. And that's like, again, that's where my heart is. Like that's where I want to help. But as far as diversity and Hamilton, I want more. I want a lot more on Broadway. There is not nearly enough. I'm glad that we're having these conversations. They're really, really very important. It's just not enough yet. I don't see, because it's not enough about representation, is what I'm learning, and what I'm trying to educate myself on is that less about representation, and more about actual like equity in the show, and we really want to see more representation on the other side. So I think representation is important on the face of it, but we need more of it on the other side. We need different kinds of voices, on that side. That's kind of my perspective of the thing.
Yeah, 100%. Because if you're just like, oh, we need a show with people of color, like get them in there, like it becomes tokenism, right? So you need people, it's the people in power. Like that's the thing about it, like power. Which I think also sort of in a practical, blunt way, like goes back to funding for
Mm,
the arts and bringing arts to underserved communities because dance classes cost a lot of money,
yep.
singing classes cost a lot of money, you know,
Yeah.
and um, and about exposure to the arts. Because
Right.
if you're a kid in a disadvantaged community and you're, a person of color, you might not know that that's a possibility for you, you
Yeah.
know?
Let alone a career.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I don't think that is ever a realistic idea. That's something I want to bring to light. I recognized how much of a privilege it was to have the education that I had, as especially in dance. Um, I I came into Manhattan every day in high school and went to the best studio in the city, and that's where I learned how to dance from some of the best educators, and that was a privilege that I
Yeah,
had and
yeah.
that my family could provide. And
Mhm.
so when you talk about how much it is and how much dedication and time and effort and all of that, it's it's so overwhelming, and we need to offer that for
Right.
free. Like we need to offer that for free
Yeah.
because it shouldn't be something that a child can't unlock without, they should have access to it no matter what.
Yeah, and there's, say if you have just left school, there's that period of when you're not making anything, right? And that's where generational and family wealth so often comes in. there's just that barrier of like people can't afford to spend years auditioning, and that's what it takes. So going back to that support for all kinds of communities, maybe like on a broader level, like leveling the playing field, working at that racial wealth gap.
Yeah, 100% equity.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Quality.
I was curious, you were talking about how you lost both your parents. I don't think I know that, and that's just, wow, my heart to you. Do you think that's part of why you were drawn to this issue of family separation and migrant children? I think that's part of what, so you talked about needing to do more, right? Being like, this is what I'm called to after going to Rwanda. Was there part of that for you, do you think, being drawn to this issue?
Absolutely. Um, I'm very empathetic.
Mhm.
I I remember my mom always telling me, "You have a really big heart, Hope." Like almost as if she was like surprised that I had so much of it. I've always had that kind of need and want to help people that are less fortunate than me. Um, and yeah, I have this platform. Like I have it and I should use it, and I have had a lot of trauma in my life, and I know that with the right help I can overcome it. Again, I have resources to do that, and I want to be able to give resources to people that don't, and that's just kind of always at the forefront because
Yeah.
of us.
Mhm.
And I see my mom was an educator too. You know, my mom was an educator. Both my parents were in musical theater. Like I I see them in my work. I feel them. I, like Disney
Yeah.
Plus, Disney Plus in the middle of quarantine, Hamilton comes out. You don't like, I don't believe in luck. Like, I believe in stars, like, kind of aligning and everything happening for a reason. And there was a reason that people needed to see Hamilton right now on Disney Plus. Like, that was something that is so needed, is that escapism, right?
Yeah. And in this moment of this elevation of the conversation of racial equality or inequality in our country, and how that going directly back to our founding, back to the Constitution, this
Mm.
document that the country runs by, essentially,
Yep.
um, framed in a conversation, people of color taking the stage. I think on so many levels, there's such power in that. Um, and that aspect of undertold stories of Hamilton, like Lin-Manuel sings it, like we don't hear as much about this guy, and if I remember correctly, that's part of why he made it. It's like this kind of amazing person. He had his flaws, very much so, but this like brilliant person we don't hear as much about, and bringing that story out, and that's part of the power of art, I think.
Absolutely.
Power to elevate undertold stories.
I'm like, you said it all. You said it all.
Snapping for art. Snapping for art.
Love it.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, so I guess,
art changes the world. It changes minds. I'll never forget one of the most memorable moments was the Tony Awards, of course. And unfortunately that it was the night before was the Pulse shooting. And we had done our tech run for the Tony Awards in the morning. And then before our matinee, Tommy came to us and they were like, "We're cutting the guns." And he said, "Theater is supposed to change minds," something along those lines. And it hit me so hard that I felt like I was, oh my God, I'm like living through like a moment in history, because it felt like, we do this show with guns. It doesn't feel like a big deal, like, oh, we're just cutting the guns, but it felt way more impactful because of this conversation around gun violence and around these things that are happening in America today that we were talking about America then. Take the bullets out your gun. Like all of those words meant so much in such a different light when you take away that one element. And that's what, like you just said, theater and art, it changes minds, it changes the world. Like it has that kind of magnitude.
yeah, yeah, and that's an example of art being responsive,
Mm.
right?
Active,
Um,
active in activism.
yeah, yeah. I remember. I think the only review of mine you could call negative was I went to a show. I will not name names. There were several elements that were like, it's 2019. Like, come on, like we know better. Like there was a suicide without a like a warning in the program, like a like trigger warning kind of a thing.
Right.
There were just really problematic narratives about those with substance abuse and women.
Woof.
So I call that show not responsive, right? And I think art has that responsibility to be extremely responsive.
Yeah, and that's part of that conversation when we had Mike Pence come to the show.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's our main goal. Our main goal is to be responsive and active in our communities and stick up for those that are less fortunate than us and don't have the same rights as us, or things along those lines, right? And
Yeah.
so speaking to him directly in that moment and taking advantage of that moment and of that time, whether he heard it or not, doesn't really matter. It's the act of doing that. I really appreciated that and stood by that.
Yeah. Moral fortitude and consistency. Like, this is what I believe in, and I'm always going to stand up for it.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Yeah. Which I think you are doing that work amazingly with Dance for Hope. So I want to ask, what's next? Tell us about what we have coming up. What's exciting?
Very exciting stuff. Well, first of all, we were doing a lot of cool things in the beginning of the year, and then COVID happened. And so there's been a lot of transition and trying to understand what an online program looks like. That being said, I am developing an online program called Leaders for Change, and it's a mentorship program with arts and advocacy. And I'm doing it. I'm co-leading it with another nonprofit called GDS, and we're working with some youth right now as kind of our pilot, and hopefully to continue it in the fall. Most definitely virtually, still, unfortunately. I'll take what I can get. Honestly, I'll take what I can get. If I can get an hour of a kid's time and try and change their mindset, their world, their life, like I'll take it. So we're doing Leaders for Change. As far as that program is concerned, we have an event on the 12th on Zoom. It's like a community event where we'll talk about kind of the program. And then this weekend is very exciting. So the Hamilton cast wanted to come together and kind of form a coalition and try and raise money for organizations fighting systemic racism, racial, social injustices. And so they got together a bunch of nonprofits, When We All Vote, Michelle Obama's voting campaign, and Color of Change, and Dance for Hope. And so we're going to be raising a bunch of money for these organizations, and I'll get to share a little bit more about Dance for Hope and my journey with it, and it'll be fun. There'll be like games and trivia and like Hamill BTS, like everyone wants to know, like, what did you guys do behind the scenes? And you'll get to find all of that out if you come. And so the information, this is my little plug. So the show, that fundraiser event, is on Looped Live, which is an app. And so you get your ticket and you go to Loop Live and you get to watch it. It's like a live stream Zoom.
All right. Well, we'll have to get that info for you, from you, so everyone can join.
Absolutely.
Yay! Yay! Yeah, I think that's all I have. So any other parting words you can share?
We pretty much covered it all. We covered a lot.
Yeah, we were so excited to follow you and what you're doing, and amazing stuff. You're at a fundraiser with Michelle Obama's organization, so you could just remember that if you ever have a bad day.
Pretty cool.
Amazing. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Yeah,
we'll have all your info, Dance for Hope, so everyone can follow and support.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Bye bye.